So Dennis, ARPA funding is a huge priority for state CIOs. It's an influx of money that we haven't seen in the last couple of years. What are some of your plans with that? How are you approaching the funding coming in?
Well, first and foremost, it was like learning how to access it, because it's a bit complex. There's a lot of rules in the Treasury guidance that you have to follow, and there's ways of doing that. So I'd encourage, all of my peers and the corporate members to understand those really well, because it helps you make the case for funding. The thing that I think is really one of the really cool things, other than having more money than you might have otherwise had, is it allows IT to be put in a more leadership position as it relates to citizen services, things like that, where we can actually go to our agency customers and say, hey, I've got an idea for something that I saw in your strategic plan, and I think maybe we could justify accessing ARPA funds for that. So that's been a big priority for me, other than kind of core infrastructure stuff, which is really neat to be able to get funding for the more easily and aggressively than I might have otherwise, but then go further than that and target citizen services, things like that. So I'm really enjoying that.
When you're talking about things like core infrastructure funding, I mean, it has long been the biggest challenge maybe for state CIOs to justify the upfront expense to modernize some of that legacy technology. I mean, what does this funding enable you to do, and how does that sort of fit into your modernization strategy?
Well, it was, I think that the COVID, what I call the great diaspora, when everybody left work and went home, and also the fact that we needed to provide services online, I think that helped our leaders and our policymakers in state government to understand that this hygiene, networks, cybersecurity, things like that, they're really important. So I was shocked when when I went and started asking for money for like unexciting things like networking and data storage and protecting it from ransomware, things that normally wouldn't be cool that I'd have to fight for. I really didn't have much trouble justifying, in light of I think that new understanding of how important it is.
And that's a big deal. I mean, when was the last time someone didn't have to fight for funding?
Yeah, no, I mean, I worked hard for it, but once it got to the approval stage in the legislature and the governor's office, and it just I didn't have much trouble justifying it in light of their I think new understanding.
And speaking of funding and cyber, I mean, it's not just the ARPA funding, right? There's infrastructure funding coming, state and local grants, guidance expected later this summer. I know there's still so many questions left on how that's going to work, but what are some of your thoughts as you approach that?
Well, one of the things that's important to myself, and I think all the NASCIO community, is getting NOFO guidance that really allows us to take a whole state approach versus a piece by piece. That's our biggest concern, is to allow the states to be strategic, whether you already have top level programs, so that the funding doesn't undermine those top level programs you already have in place, or if you don't, at least you can create a strategic approach to it versus what I would call a tactical approach, where each municipality does it on their own.
And what's that in New Hampshire? What's that collaboration environment like between state and municipality? Have you have any mechanisms in place to facilitate that sharing, or is it really just rubber meets the road, getting out there talking to folks?
Well, it's a lot of hard work and socialization. Our motto is live free or die, so everybody wants to be pretty independent. And so I've been spending a lot of time trying to build coalition, build trust, build community around some basic ideas and work my way up the idea food chain. And it's a lot of fun. I love doing that kind of work, but it's a lot of work.
And then let's shift gears a little bit and talk about workforce. I mean, top priority for everyone. It's a huge deal. What are some of the challenges that you're facing when it comes to the workforce, and what are some of the ways that you're trying to get across them?
Well, what we've seen in New Hampshire, and I think my colleagues are seeing this, is the delta of competitiveness in a lot of cases between the private sector and the public sector has increased. So, and that's driven particularly in areas of, compensation's one thing, but I think the whole flexibility of work-life balance that happened in COVID and now is a basic expectation. A lot of states didn't, they tried to go back, and it was very unhelpful to retaining good skilled people. And I think there's a lot of, hot skills out there. So as you skill up your state workers, it makes them very, and I would never say you shouldn't skill up your state workers, you absolutely should, but it's created an environment where they are extremely marketable and can, have a higher level of compensation and that flexibility that they all desire. So that's been our challenge. And we're working on creative ways of trying to deal with that while surviving, because we still have to get the work done. I'm running the highest vacancy rate in my department in the history of my department, which is almost 20 years old. So.
Wow. And so, I mean, when you look at a high vacancy like that, I mean, what are some of those here and now ways where you're trying to fill those jobs, trying to get folks in those roles?
Well, I hate to say it, but staff augmentation is a big thing. We're doing a lot of that, bringing in skills on a, kind of a tactical level as we build up what our strategic approach is. But also, working on policies inside the state that help us be more competitive, like having, more forward-looking and embracing telework schedules and job flexibility type options to counteract the fact that, we might not pay as much as the private sector. So we still do have really great benefits, which, some people care about, others don't. The younger, that long-term benefit and retirement thing isn't as attractive as it used to be, particularly to young people. So we need new ways of doing things there too.